My name is Elias Thorne. For most of my life, I believed that name was inseparable from another, Cresswell. My mother, Helen Cresswell, raised me with the quiet but firm understanding that my identity was an extension of her family's legacy in our small city of Havenwood, Oregon. The Cresswells weren't just a family, they were an institution. Cresswell and Sons Construction had built half the town, the library, the new wing of the hospital, the sturdy, respectable homes in the old quarter. My grandfather started it with a hammer and a dream, and my father, Arthur Cresswell, took it over and turned it into a regional powerhouse. I was never meant to be a part of it. My own father was a painter who left when I was 2, leaving behind a few canvases and a void my mother quickly filled with the imposing shadow of her family. I was the odd one out, the quiet, artistic boy in a lineage of pragmatic builders. While my older brother, Leo, was learning to read blueprints, I was learning to sketch the way light fell on the Douglas firs outside my window. I went to school for architecture, a compromise that felt like a bridge between my world and theirs. I thought I could design beautiful, meaningful spaces, and they could build them. It was a naive hope. After I graduated, my father, my stepfather, Arthur, but he'd insisted I call him Dad since I was 10, offered me a position. Not as a designer, but in operations. "You need to learn the business from the foundation up, Eli," he'd said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "All this art school stuff is fine, but this is the real world." For 6 years, I dutifully learned. I streamlined their logistics, digitized their archaic bookkeeping, and built the modern framework that allowed the company to thrive in a new century. I was good at it, which surprised everyone, including myself. But my heart was never in it. My heart was with Annalise. Annalise was everything the Cresswells were not. She was a botanist, a woman who found her purpose in the patient, gentle work of coaxing life from the soil. She saw the world not as something to be conquered and built upon, but as something to be understood and nurtured. With her, I wasn't the awkward artist or the reluctant businessman. I was just Elias. She saw the designs I still sketched late at night, the models of impossible buildings I kept hidden in my study, and she didn't see a hobby. She saw me. When I asked her to marry me, it felt like I was finally laying the foundation for my own life, separate from the one that had been assigned to me. And for a little while, it seemed my family understood. My mother helped Annalise choose flowers. My father offered us a generous check for the wedding, a gesture that felt more like a corporate sponsorship than a gift. Leo, ever the pragmatist, advised me on the most cost-effective caterers. They all RSVP'd yes. They were supposed to be there. The day of our wedding was perfect, one of those rare, transcendent days in late September when the Oregon autumn feels less like a season and more like a state of grace. We were married at the Silver Creek Gardens, a sprawling sanctuary of towering redwoods and manicured lawns that sloped gently toward a crystalline stream. The air smelled of damp earth and late-blooming roses. Annalise was luminous, her smile a beacon of pure joy that made the whole world feel right. Standing under a canopy of ancient oaks, I watched her walk toward me, and the last vestiges of my life as the other Cresswell seemed to dissolve. Here, I was simply her husband. Our friends and her family filled the white-painted chairs, their faces bright with affection. I remember catching the eye of my aunt, Jody, my mother's sister, who gave me a warm, reassuring wink. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with promises we had written ourselves. But as we walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, a small, cold knot began to form in my stomach. The front row on my side, 4 chairs reserved for my father, my mother, Leo, and my younger sister, Clara, was starkly empty. They were perfectly arranged, untouched, a silent, glaring void in the tapestry of our celebration. Stuck in traffic, my best man, Sam, whispered as we signed the marriage license in the conservatory. "Must be," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. I'd sent them all a text that morning. "See you soon. Can't wait." My mother had replied with a simple heart emoji. No warning. No explanation. During the reception, the emptiness of their table became a constant, throbbing presence. The staff hovered near it, uncertain. Annalise's parents kept casting worried glances in my direction. I deflected questions with a tight smile and a vague shrug, determined not to let their absence poison the most beautiful day of my life. I danced with Annalise, our first dance as husband and wife, and for those 3 minutes, holding her in my arms with the scent of her freesia bouquet filling my senses, I almost forgot. But then my phone buzzed. I stepped away from the warmth of the reception tent into the cool night air. I expected a congratulatory text, perhaps a belated apology. Instead, it was a notification from the family's private messaging group, a chat we'd had for years called the Cresswell Crust. It wasn't a message. It was a system alert. You have been removed from the group. I stared at the words, the letters sharp and clinical. I tried to open the app to search for the group, but it was gone, as if it had never existed. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact, then my father's. What could I even say? Did you mean to do that? The coldness of the act was so absolute, so deliberate, it left no room for questions. It was an answer in itself. A wave of nausea washed over me. It wasn't just that they hadn't shown up. It was that they had chosen this exact moment, my wedding day, to formally and digitally excise me from the family. I walked back into the tent, the music and laughter suddenly sounding distant and hollow. Annalise saw my face and immediately came to my side. "What is it?" she murmured, her hand finding mine. I couldn't bring myself to tell her, not then. I just shook my head. Nothing. I'm just overwhelmed. She knew I was lying, but she let it go. She squeezed my hand and led me back to the dance floor, her presence a steady anchor in my sudden, silent storm. We stayed until the end, smiling for photos, thanking our guests, playing the part of the happy newlyweds. But every smile felt like a crack in a dam, holding back a flood of confusion and hurt that I didn't yet have the words to name. The 4 empty chairs were the last thing I saw as we left, a monument to a betrayal I couldn't yet comprehend. We drove to the coast for our honeymoon, to a small, secluded cabin nestled in the cliffs above a town called Sea Haven. The plan was to spend a week unwinding, hiking the rugged trails, and listening to the crash of the Pacific. For 2 days, we managed it. We built fires in the stone hearth, walked for miles along the windswept beach, and let the rhythmic roar of the ocean wash away the stress of the wedding. In the quiet solitude of our cabin, with Annalise's head on my chest, I almost convinced myself that my family's absence was a strange, painful gift, the final, clean break I'd never had the courage to make myself. Then, on the 3rd morning, the other shoe dropped. Annalise was brewing coffee, the rich aroma filling our little sanctuary, while I scrolled idly through my phone. I opened Instagram, a mindless habit, and there it was. A post from my sister, Clara. The photo was bright, saturated with the harsh light of a tropical sun. My father, my mother, Leo, and Clara stood on a white sand beach, turquoise water sparkling behind them. They were all wearing garishly bright, matching floral shirts. They held colorful cocktails topped with little umbrellas. My father, who hated having his picture taken, had a triumphant arm slung around Leo. My mother was beaming, her smile wider and more carefree than I'd seen it in years. It was the caption that landed the final blow. 5 simple words beneath the vibrant, happy image, finally, the 4 of us. The air left my lungs. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a declaration. They hadn't just skipped my wedding, they had replaced it. They had flown to Cabo San Lucas to celebrate their unity, a unity that, the caption made painfully clear, was only complete in my absence. The family, their family, was finally whole without me. I sat there on the cozy, handcrafted sofa, the phone feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. A strange calm washed over me, cold and clear as the ocean outside. It was the kind of calm that comes after a devastating storm, when the wind dies down and all you can see is the wreckage. The hurt was still there, but it had crystallized into something harder, something more resolute. Annalise came over and sat beside me, placing her warm mug on the wooden table. She saw the photo over my shoulder. She didn't gasp or exclaim. She just took my hand, her fingers lacing through mine, and waited. "I need to send a message," I said, my voice even. She nodded, understanding that this wasn't about starting a fight. It was about ending one. She handed me her phone, as she was, of course, still a member of the Cresswell crust. I found the group, saw their recent chatter about airport logistics and dinner reservations, all posted on my wedding day. My fingers moved with a steady, detached precision. I typed a single sentence, "Enjoy it while it lasts." I sent it, then handed the phone back to Annalise. She deleted the message from her end and blocked the chat. Then I opened my laptop. Cresswell and Sons Construction was a partnership. When I joined, my father had made me a junior partner, granting me a 10% stake in the company as an incentive. I was the one who had modernized their entire operation. I had set up the digital payroll system, the online project management software, and, most critically, the financial protocols. To prevent the kind of casual, under-the-table dealings my father was fond of, I had implemented a dual-signature authorization for any transfer or expenditure over $25,000. He complained it was bureaucratic nonsense, but he'd signed the paperwork because the bank had recommended it for fraud prevention. He barely knew how to log in. I logged into the state's business registry and filed the initial paperwork to dissolve my partnership. I transferred my shares into a third-party escrow account, a move that would legally freeze them until the dissolution was finalized. And then, I accessed the company's primary banking portal. With my partnership now in a state of legal dissolution, my authority over the accounts was clear. I placed a hold on the master payroll account. No funds could be withdrawn without my explicit, secondary authorization. Payroll was scheduled for Friday. It was now Tuesday. I closed the laptop. The roar of the ocean outside suddenly sounded like a promise. A foundation had cracked. I had spent my life trying to fit into their structure, and now I would see how well it stood without me. The silence that followed was profound. We finished our honeymoon in a bubble of quiet intimacy, the unspoken tension having been replaced by a shared, unspoken resolve. When we returned to Havenwood, it felt like coming back to a different town, or perhaps seeing the same town through new eyes. A week passed. Then another. I heard nothing from my family. It was as if I had ceased to exist, and for a while, I wondered if my actions had even registered. I started looking for architecture jobs in Portland, sending out my portfolio, the one Annalise had encouraged me to update. It felt good, like I was finally steering my own ship. The first ripple came not from my family, but from their accountant, a perpetually flustered man named George. He left a clipped, nervous voicemail. "Elias, George Riley here. Just calling about a few discrepancies with the payroll run. It seems to have bounced. And the IRS has sent a query regarding some unfiled quarterly tax forms. The system won't let me access them. Give me a call." I didn't call back. The tax forms were filed through a portal linked exclusively to my credentials, a security measure I'd put in place after I'd found Leo expensing personal vacations as client site visits. Without me, they were locked out. The real tremor hit that evening. I was in the kitchen, helping Annalise wash vegetables for dinner, when a furious, insistent pounding began at our front door. Not a knock, a pounding. It went on for a full minute, a frantic, desperate rhythm that echoed through our small house. Annalise and I exchanged a look. "It's him," she said softly. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door. I didn't open it right away. I let him stand there on the porch, stewing in his own fury. After the pounding subsided, I waited another 30 seconds, then turned the lock and opened the door. My father, Arthur Cresswell, stood there, his face blotchy and red, his expensive suit rumpled. He looked like he'd run all the way from his office. "What did you do?" he snarled, trying to step past me into the house. I didn't move. I just stood in the doorway, my body a quiet but immovable barrier. "I think you know." "The payroll," he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "You froze the payroll. The men are threatening to walk. 2 suppliers just put a hold on our materials for the library project. Do you have any idea what you've done to this company?" "Our company, you mean?" I asked, my tone gentle. "Or is it just your company now? I'm a little unclear on the family structure these days." His eyes narrowed. He was a man accustomed to being in control, to having his anger be enough to make people fold. My calm was disarming him, and it only made him angrier. This is not a game, Elias. This is our legacy. Everything your grandfather built. He built it on integrity, I replied. A concept you seem to have forgotten. The IRS called. He finally spat out, the words a desperate trump card. They're flagging 5 years of returns. 5 years. Because of your little stunt, they think we're hiding something. If you don't fix this, we're all going down. We. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with irony. We. I repeated softly. We didn't include the son whose wedding you skipped to go to Cabo. We didn't include the man you kicked out of the family chat while he was celebrating the most important day of his life. From where I'm standing, it sounds like we is just the 4 of you now. This sounds like your problem. For the first time, a flicker of something other than anger crossed his face. It might have been fear. He quickly buried it under a fresh wave of bluster. He called me petty, a child throwing a tantrum. He said I was destroying everything he had given me. Then he reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a folded document, waving it in my face. I had my lawyer look over our partnership agreement. There's a clause. In cases of gross negligence or malicious sabotage, I have the right to override your financial authority. I'm going to prove that's what this is. You're trying to sink us out of spite. It was a weak threat, and we both knew it. The paper trail I had meticulously built over 6 years would show the exact opposite of negligence. Every decision I made was documented. Every concern I'd raised about their shoddy financial practices logged in emails he'd probably never even read. I just smiled, a small, sad smile. Good luck with that, Dad. I used the word deliberately, and I saw it land like a physical blow. He stared at me for a long moment, his chest heaving, his face a mask of thwarted rage. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed back to his car. I closed the door, the click of the lock echoing in the sudden quiet. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was a profound, aching sadness. I hadn't wanted this war. But now that it had begun, I knew I had to see it through. Not for revenge, but for the simple, clean truth of it. The days that followed were a quiet storm of legal maneuvering. A cease and desist letter arrived from my father's lawyer. My own lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman Annalise had found for me in Portland, responded with a preliminary audit of my contributions to the company, subtly noting several financial red flags I had documented over the years. The true turning point, however, came from an unexpected direction. My mother. She texted me for the first time since her heart emoji on my wedding day. Elias, can we please talk? This has all gone too far. No apology. No explanation. Just a plea to smooth things over, to return to a status quo that had become intolerable. I didn't respond. 2 nights later, she appeared on our doorstep. She looked smaller than I remembered, her face etched with a worry that seemed more about appearances than genuine distress. I let her in, and we sat in the living room, the space filled with a tense silence. Annalise had quietly retreated to the garden, giving us space, but remaining a felt presence, a silent source of strength. Your father is not himself, my mother began, her voice soft and placating. He's under so much pressure. This IRS business, he's terrified. He should be, I said. It was a mistake, Eli, she continued, her eyes pleading. Missing the wedding. We should have been there. Your father just got this idea in his head that it would be better to give everyone some space. He and Leo were fighting, and he didn't want to bring that tension to your big day. It was a masterful performance of revisionist history. The carefully planned trip, the matching shirts, the triumphant photo, none of it fit with a spontaneous, well-intentioned decision. And the photo, Mom? I asked quietly. The one Clara posted. Finally, the 4 of us. Was that about giving me space, too? Her composure cracked. A flash of irritation crossed her face before she smoothed it away. Clara is young. She doesn't think. You can't hold that against us. She leaned forward, her tone shifting from apology to appeal. They've frozen his personal accounts, Eli. His and mine. We can't pay the mortgage. We can't even buy groceries. Leo is a mess. Your father is talking about selling the house. She was trying to leverage my empathy, the ingrained instinct of a son to care for his mother. But the well of that empathy had run dry. "This is the mess you all made," I said, my voice flat. "Not me. But you can fix it," she insisted, her voice rising. "Just release the accounts. Give the IRS what they want and tell them it was all a misunderstanding. We can get through this as a family." I just looked at her. I saw a woman so committed to the facade of her life that she would ask the son she had publicly disowned to lie to federal agents to preserve it. "There is no we anymore, Mom," I said. "You made that perfectly clear." Her face hardened. The gentle, worried mother vanished, replaced by the cold Cresswell matriarch. "You think you're so innocent in all this? Your father is a fighter. If you push him into a corner, he will come out swinging. He will tell them you were the one managing the books. He will say you orchestrated this whole thing to take over the company. He will ruin you, Elias, just to save himself." I stood up. "Then let him try." I walked to the door and held it open for her. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and fury. She had come expecting to find the pliable, eager to please boy she had raised. Instead, she had found a man she no longer recognized. She walked out without another word. As I closed the door, I felt a profound sense of release. Her threat wasn't a source of fear, it was a confirmation. They would never change. They would burn down the world before they admitted they were the ones who had struck the match. The next day, an email landed in my inbox from a name I hadn't seen in over a decade, Benjamin Thorne. It was my uncle, my real father's younger brother. But the name was a pseudonym. It was Ben Cresswell, my stepfather's estranged brother. The story I'd always been told was that he'd been pushed out of the company for incompetence and mismanagement 20 years ago. His email was short and to the point. Subject: Cresswell and Sons. Elias. I heard through the grapevine about what's happening. I'm not surprised. I'm just surprised it took this long for the rot to show. If you want to know what you're really up against, meet me for coffee. I have some old documents you might find illuminating. Ben. I met him at a quiet, unassuming diner in a town 30 miles south of Havenwood. Ben Cresswell was older than I remembered, his hair gray and his face lined with the kind of deep-set wrinkles that come from a life of hard work and quiet disappointment. But his eyes were clear and direct. There was no bitterness in him, only a weary resignation. He slid a thick, worn manila folder across the table before the waitress had even brought our coffee. "Your father, Arthur, he's a lot of things," Ben said, his voice a low rumble. "But he's not creative. The tricks he's pulling now are the same ones he used to push me out." I opened the folder. Inside were copies of old bank statements, internal memos, and supplier invoices from 2 decades ago. The story they told was sickeningly familiar. Arthur and a young Leo had been systematically overbilling clients for premium materials while using cheaper, substandard substitutes. They'd created a shell company, a fake subcontractor, to which they'd funnel the difference. When Ben discovered it, he'd confronted Arthur. He thought his own brother would do the right thing. Instead, Arthur had offered him a choice: take a modest buyout and sign a non-disclosure agreement, or be publicly ruined for mismanaging the very projects he was trying to fix. Ben, with a young family to support, had taken the deal and vanished from our lives, branded a failure. "He didn't just steal money, Eli," Ben said, stirring his coffee. "He stole my name, my reputation. He built his kingdom on a rotten foundation, and he was happy to bury me in it to keep it standing." As I looked at the documents, the proof of a betrayal that predated my own by 20 years, everything clicked into place. This wasn't about me. It was a pattern. My offense wasn't a specific action, it was my very nature. Like Ben, I was the one who asked questions, the one who saw the cracks in the facade. The one who had to be removed for the lie to continue. "Why no?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Why give this to me?" Ben looked out the diner window at the passing cars. "Because for 20 years, I've watched him build a legacy on that lie. And I see him doing the same thing to you. He's trying to brand you as the saboteur, the ungrateful son. But you're not. You're just the one who finally turned on the lights." He pushed the folder toward me. "It's your fight now, son. But at least you should know the truth of what you're fighting." I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, its weight feeling both immense and liberating. My father hadn't just betrayed me. He had built his entire life on a series of betrayals. The company wasn't a legacy, it was a crime scene. That evening, I got a frantic text from my sister, Clara. "Eli, please. Dad is talking to a reporter. He's going to tell everyone you forged his signature on financial documents. Mom is just letting him. You have to stop this." Her plea was laced with the panic of someone on a sinking ship. But there was no lifeboat I could offer her that wouldn't also save the people who had drilled the holes in the hull. I thought about Annalise, about the life we were trying to build, a life of honesty and light. I thought about the 4 empty chairs at our wedding. And I thought about Ben Cresswell, a good man who had lived for 2 decades in the shadow of a lie. I took the manila folder to my study. I scanned every single page. Then I opened my laptop and composed a new email. I attached Ben's evidence. I attached the audit my lawyer had prepared. I attached emails where I had flagged questionable invoices, only to be overruled by my father. The recipient was the lead investigator at the Internal Revenue Service. I wrote a simple subject line, "Full disclosure regarding Cresswell and Sons Construction." Then I sat there for a long time, my finger hovering over the mouse. This was the final step. This was the point of no return. I wasn't just severing a tie, I was burning the bridge, the pier, and salting the earth on the other side. It wasn't an act of anger anymore. It was an act of sanitation. Annalise came into the study and stood behind me, her hands resting gently on my shoulders. She didn't ask what I was doing. She didn't need to. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I looked at the screen, at the clean, orderly files ready to be sent. And for the first time in months, I felt a sense of profound peace. I was no longer reacting to their cruelty. I was choosing my own path, a path paved with the truth, no matter how harsh. "I am now," I said. And I clicked send. The aftermath was swift and total. It wasn't a slow crumble, it was a collapse. The documents I sent, combined with what the IRS had already uncovered, painted an undeniable picture of systemic, multi-decade fraud. The story broke in the regional news, not as a rumor, but as a federal investigation. Prominent Havenwood developer accused of tax evasion and racketeering. Their assets, both business and personal, were not just frozen but seized. The half-finished library project, a symbol of Cresswell prestige, became a monument to their disgrace, surrounded by chain-link fences and legal notices. I received one final communication from my family. It was a single, rambling email from Clara, sent from a library computer. It was a torrent of apology, blame, and desperation. She confessed that the Cabo trip had been Leo's idea, a way to reclaim the family narrative. She said our mother knew about the financial dealings, but chose to live in a state of willful ignorance, enjoying the fruits of the deception without ever touching the poison. She attached a flash drive's worth of data, a final, desperate act of self-preservation. It contained recent voice memos of our father coaching Leo on how to lie to investigators, and spreadsheets detailing a hidden offshore account. She was sorry, she wrote. She was so sorry. But she didn't want to go down with them. I forwarded her email and its contents to the investigator without comment. One last gift. Then I blocked her email address. It's been a year. Annalise and I sold our little house in Havenwood and moved to a small town on the coast, not far from where we spent our honeymoon. We used the money from the sale and our own savings, funds untouched by the Cresswell legacy, to buy a small plot of land overlooking the ocean. I've started my own design firm, small and selective. I design homes that work with the landscape, not against it. Homes with strong foundations and lots of light. Annalise's botanical work is thriving. Our garden is a riot of color and life, a testament to her patient care. Our life is quiet. It is real. Sometimes, late at night, I think of them. My father, I heard, took a plea bargain. Leo did not. My mother lives with her sister now, the grand Cresswell house sold to cover legal fees. I don't know where Clara is. I feel a pang of sadness for the family I thought I had, the one I mourned at my own wedding. But I don't feel anger. I don't feel a need for revenge. What I did was not for them. It was for me. It was the most difficult and necessary act of self-respect I have ever committed. I learned that family is not an obligation you are born into, but a sanctuary you build. It's the person who holds your hand while your world falls apart. It's the quiet understanding in their eyes that says, I am with you. It's the shared, steady work of building a life of integrity, one honest day at a time. Last week, Annalise and I stood on the frame of the house we are building for ourselves. The sun was setting over the Pacific, casting long shadows from the pines. The air was crisp and clean. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we watched the sky turn from gold to violet. There were no empty chairs here. There were no ghosts of what should have been. There was only the solid feel of the foundation beneath our feet and the endless, open horizon ahead. And for the first time, I felt completely, unshakably whole.